He's not interested even to kill even an ant. That is real love.
I agree with you that we love very badly and we slaughter the animals.
So badly love is not love.
But is the converse true, that we chant very well and that we can love Krishna even when we cannot love our fellow people?
You are chanting, you are also working. It is not that. You are simply sitting down and chanting. Because you are chanting, therefore you are loving everyone. That's a fact. These Hare Krishna chanters, they never agree to kill any animal, even a plant, because they know everything is part and parcel of God. Why unnecessarily one should be killed? That is love.
Love means never killing?
There are so many things. It is one of the items. Yes, that is one. Do you kill your own son? Why? Because you love him.
Would you explain the other side of it? The fact that, of course, the Bhagavad Gita has its setting on a battlefield in which Krishna enjoins Arjuna.
That killing and poor animal who is supplying milk, you are drinking milk, your mother, and you are killing. This killing and that killing is not the same thing. According to Vedic civilization, the cow is to be given special protection. Why? It is recommended for the cow. It does not say of other animals.
Srila Prabhupada, you are aware that they advanced the argument of mesmerization against chanting. The psychologists
That's good.
doing that.
That's good. If you can mesmerize, that Dr. Judas admitted, that you can mesmerize the drug-addicted hippies and engage them in understanding Krishna, it's a great achievement.
Commercials.
Yeah.
It's not mesmerization.
Whatever it may be. Dr. Judas admitted. So, if mesmerization is for good, why not accept it? If it is for bad, then it is another thing. If it is doing good, why not accept it? What do you think?
I don't know how to react. I think I agree with you.
If it is good, everything good should be accepted.
No problem. I keep wondering how you're so sure you know what good is, particularly when it comes to war. I would be a little more worried, I think, that...
What is that word?
Well, when you were telling that sometimes war is necessary, I should think that it's important to know how to decide when...
Well, necessary means you cannot expect in this material world all saintly persons. There are bad elements. So if a bad element comes to attack you, is it not your duty to fight and protect?
So it just may be, though, that mine are the bad elements, and I keep thinking that other people are the bad elements.
Yeah.
That's right.
Even God has got this discrimination. He says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinasaya cha dushkitam. There are bad elements. In God's mind, there is good element, bad element. So we are part and parcel of God. We must have also the same sentiment. You cannot avoid it.
The body is not divided.
Yeah.
He's saying that when we say everything is part of God, the body is an
also.
exception. He says the body then is an exception. The
No.
body is not part of God?
No, why? Body is also part.
Yes, the body is also part.
Yeah, that's it. I explained.
Maya Shakti.
Yes, it is another energy.
I see.
Inferior energy.
Inferior energy.
Everything is God's energy. The body is also God's energy. The best use of the body is God's energy should be utilized for God. Then it is body spiritualized. Body is also God's energy. And if it is engaged in God's service, then the body is no more bad bargain. It is a good bargain. Taraya karuna ghana ghanatyam prapta sakalana gunanavasha Vande Guru Sri Charanarvindam.
His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The movement he started is now known to millions around the world, yet he himself remained in the background. Without personal ambition, he worked humbly to spread Krishna consciousness, devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet his achievements and personal character did not go unnoticed. The world's leading scholars and religionists praised his unique contribution, and thousands grew to love him as their dearmost friend and well-wisher. In his memory, his disciples erected a stunning memorial in the hills of West Virginia, now visited by 500,000 people a year. In this and many other ways around the world, Srila Prabhupada is offered expressions of love by those whose lives he most deeply touched.
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare.
Always remember Krishna, God, and never forget him. This was the goal of the rich spiritual culture that flourished in India for thousands of years. Even today, Lord Krishna is remembered and glorified through monumental achievements in architecture, art, drama, music, dance, and philosophy. Calcutta, 1896, the capital of India, the crown jewel of the British Empire, an elegant city of wide avenues and spacious parks. It is here that Aboy Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami is born. A pure devotee of Krishna from birth, Aboy Charan is raised in a well-to-do mercantile family. From infancy, he goes with his father to the Radha Krishna temple, and at age 4, the child spontaneously begins worshiping similar deities in his home. When Aboy Charan hears of Ratha Yatra, a traditional festival in honor of Lord Krishna, it further inspires his natural devotion. With his father's help, every year he holds his own small celebration, drawing the neighborhood children into the festivities. At age 8, Aboy Charan enters the nearby Mati Lal Seal School. After graduation, he attends Scottish Churches College, one of the most respected in Calcutta. At the time, Mahatma Gandhi is organizing his countrymen in a nationwide boycott of everything British. Gandhiism is surging through India, uniting her in a massive non-cooperation movement. Sensitive to British subjugation of India's culture and people, Aboy Charan becomes an early supporter of Gandhi's movement. But 1922 marks a turning point in Aboy Charan's life. He meets Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, the greatest devotee of Krishna of his time. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta belongs to the disciplic succession of spiritual masters extending back to Lord Krishna himself. He convinces Aboy Charan that Krishna's spiritual message transcends India's dependent position. Nothing is more important. He requests Aboy Charan to spread Krishna consciousness in the Western world. Aboy Charan hears and is deeply impressed. By this time, Aboy Charan has a growing family. He moves to Allahabad and starts a successful pharmacy. All the while, his spiritual master's words remain implanted in his heart. In 1933, he becomes a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who comments, "He will do everything in due time." 3 years later, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta leaves this world, after again requesting Aboy Charan to preach in English. Aboy Charan takes his words to heart and starts writing prodigiously. In 1944, he single-handedly begins publishing and distributing Back to Godhead, a fortnightly. The first issue addresses the crisis of war. The Second World War within 20 years is scourging the earth. Back to Godhead points out that people throughout the world want an end to war. But so often they want God's kingdom without God, and they cannot have it. All our plans will be doomed to failure by our own selfishness unless we turn to God. After the war, Aboy Charan moves to Jhansi and founds the League of Devotees. He prepares a charter for an international organization, its members dedicated to a peaceful, God-centered life. Acharya Prabhakar, his first disciple, remembers.
शिक्षा लेने के लिए, दीक्षा लेने के लिए उन्होंने प्रश्न किया.
He was always teaching Krishna consciousness, and people came to him for knowledge. After hearing from him, many wanted to become his disciple. He told them, "I can make you my disciple, but first you please chant the names of God and give up cigarettes, meat-eating, illicit sex, and gambling." But few people would agree to give up these habits. Then he said, "Indians are imitating the Westerners. I will make disciples in the West. Then when the Indian people see Westerners following religious principles, they will also follow." Following tradition, at age 58, Aboy Charan retires from family life, and 5 years later accepts the renounced order. He is now known as A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He lives alone in the historic medieval temple of Radha Damodar in Vrindavan, engaged in deep studies and writing. It was in Vrindavan that Lord Krishna revealed his pastimes 50 centuries ago, and saintly persons throughout the ages have worshipped this land as the most sacred on earth. Unlike other holy men who live there, Bhaktivedanta Swami is not thinking of retiring. For him, Vrindavan is a source of inspiration, an ideal place to chant, worship, and write. Here he begins work on his life's masterpiece, translation and commentary on the monumental devotional classic Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktivedanta Swami calls it a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire human society. But often he leaves Vrindavan to print his magazine and books in nearby Delhi. Traveling takes time and tolerance, but Bhaktivedanta Swami accepts it as part of his spiritual mission to broadcast devotional service to Lord Krishna. He writes, "Our leaders have carefully set aside the treasure house of India's spiritual asset, and they are imitating the Western material way of life. But people are more unhappy than ever before because of the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect." In Delhi, Bhaktivedanta Swami personally distributes copies of Back to Godhead, and with small donations, struggles to maintain the publication. He regularly sees Surendra Kumar Jain, a printer.
It was somewhere in the month of February 1956 that I first met Prabhupada. He came to my press for getting the magazine printed, Back to Godhead. I found that it was not very easy for him to collect money. He would come to the press practically every day, and after the printing was done, he would do everything himself. But he was a dedicated person, a very committed person. And at the times when he was not in a position to pay the bills, I would ask him, why are you running this? Why don't you stop it? He would say, no, it is my mission. And one day, Surendra Kumar, you will see that I will succeed in my mission.
By 1964, Bhaktivedanta Swami completes 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri lauds his accomplishment and recommends his books for placement in India's public libraries. Sumati Morarji, chairman of the Scindia Steamship Company, gives contributions for printing Bhaktivedanta Swami's books and arranges for his passage to America.
And he used to come every evening. And one day he said that he would like to go to America. I was surprised. I said, Swamiji, don't go there. You are too old to go, and it will be too cold for you. Still he insisted. So I said, all right. So I made arrangement for him to go by Jaladuta. On way, while he was passing through Suez, that day was Lord Krishna's birthday. And he gathered all the people on board the ship, all the crew members, officers, and recited some shloka, and then some prasad was distributed to them and all that.
Bhaktivedanta Swami, a lone mendicant, 70 years old, traveling halfway across the world. His only resources, the message he carries and his unflinching faith. The voyage on the Jaladuta proves a great trial. Bhaktivedanta Swami endures seasickness and then suffers severe chest pains. In 2 days, he has 2 heart attacks. If another comes, he thinks he will surely not survive. But gradually, he recovers. He writes, I feel today better, but I am feeling separation from Vrindavan. I have no qualification, but I have taken up the risk just to carry out the order of my spiritual master. September 17th, 1965, the Jaladuta arrives in Boston Harbor. On board, Bhaktivedanta Swami writes, My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Most of the population here is absorbed in material life. How will I make them understand your message? I can simply repeat your words, and if you like, you can make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge, but I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I have been designated as Bhaktivedanta, devotion with knowledge, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhaktivedanta. Signed, the most unfortunate, insignificant beggar, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Bhaktivedanta Swami first stays in Butler, Pennsylvania, in the home of a friend's son, Gopal Agarwal, and his wife Sally.
The Swami was a friend of my husband's father, Mr. Agarwal, in Agra, India. And he asked me to sponsor the Swami, and that's what I did. And that's why he came to our house in the middle of the night one night. He stayed with us for a month in Butler. And I learned, over the time, I learned to love him as I would a father-in-law. He was a very sensitive and kindly type of person. He was indeed one of the most unusual men I've ever known in my life. The Swami came with so few possessions. He came with the clothes he had on his back. He had a typewriter, and he had his books. And he had a bag of cereal. Imagine coming to a country on the other side of the world with so little, and yet he came with so much in himself. The Swami brought a pan with him in which he cooked his food, and in fact cooked our lunch too. Our little boy was only 6 months old when he came, and the Swami was there when Bridge first stood, and he laughed and laughed to see him stand up. When he laughed, he was just oceanic, oceanic. He just seemed to take in the entire universe when he laughed, and he laughed a lot. I enjoyed my association for that 1 month with him about as much as I've enjoyed anything in my life.
Although comfortable in Butler, Bhaktivedanta Swami thought the most important philosophy in the world, Krishna consciousness, should be spread in one of the most important cities in the world, New York. He moves to 100 West 72nd Street. 3 months later, his typewriter and tape recorder for translating are stolen. Bhaktivedanta Swami later said, "I came to America risking my life. I was physically unfit and at the fag end of my days. Sometimes I did not know where to live, nor was I used to the severe cold. Seemingly I was alone for 1 year, but I never felt alone. I always felt the presence of my spiritual master, so I did not lose my enthusiasm, despite all difficulties." Bhaktivedanta Swami arrived in America during a decade of discontent. There's widespread dissatisfaction with America's war in Vietnam and with what some consider her racist, exploitative dealings at home and abroad. Disillusioned by the establishment, the youth create a counterculture of their own. Around the time Bhaktivedanta Swami came, waves of Americans are breaking away from the status quo, searching for an alternative. For a short time, Bhaktivedanta Swami lives in the Bowery in a loft given by a friend. Mukunda Goswami, who was attending his classes at this time, tells of their first meeting.
He wore very thick glasses and had a big Sanskrit book spread out before him. His voice was very deep and resonant. He spoke with great authority, and the Sanskrit shlokas he spoke were very beautiful, very melodious. He was obviously a very distinguished scholar, and I became very curious, almost astonished as to how someone of his stature, he looked very much like an aristocrat, could be living and residing in the Bowery, the Skid Row of New York. And afterwards, I approached him to speak. I was standing, and he was sitting on his small dais, so he was looking up at me, and he had the look of a very happy, innocent young child. And I could see that he actually had all the time in the world for me. He wasn't short of time. I asked questions, he would answer. Then after some time, he moved to a somewhat better neighborhood on 2nd Avenue. We helped him rent a small storefront there, and he had an apartment in the back. And within a few weeks' time, this little storefront on 2nd Avenue, on the Lower East Side of New York, which was then populated by thousands of young hippies, had been transformed into a beautiful Krishna temple. Allen Ginsberg, I remember, began to come at that time.
When he moved down the Lower East Side, I thought that was a stroke of brilliant social judgment, because traditionally, Swamis, yogis, Zen masters all moved uptown to the rich and were sponsored and funded by the rich, and you would find Krishnamurti living in elegant apartments on the Upper East Side with drawing rooms and French furniture, and here was Bhaktivedanta like in the depths of Calcutta, where the hippies were and where the acid heads were, and the freaks and the amphetamine heads and the meth monsters. So it seemed like he was actually bringing some kind of ray of song and light to the right place, the lower depths where it was needed, and where, of course, the Lower East Side was the intellectual center in certain respects, in art and in advanced spiritual vibrations, particularly in the 60s. So it seemed historically just move on his part.
told me about Love Celebration at Tompkins Square Park, which was last Thursday, or Thursday before last. And I knew I had been seeking a guru for a while. So Krishna sent me there, and I was there. And after meeting some of the initiates, I knew that the Swami really had to be into something.
I came here in America in September 1965. I was wandering in the street, and some of the boys saw me, and gradually they came to me. My mission is to preach the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This transcendental vibration will cleanse the dirty things of the mind. It doesn't matter what he is. This transcendental vibration is equally appealing to everyone without any question of language, nationality, creed, or caste, because it is coming forth from the depth of the soul.
Krishna was all along preparing something, Bhaktivedanta Swami later wrote, and he brought you to me one by one, sincere boys and girls, to be trained in Krishna consciousness. Now I can see that it is a miracle. Otherwise, one old man with only a few books to sell for barely getting food, how could he survive? What to speak of introducing a God-conscious movement in a materialistic society? For Bhaktivedanta Swami, these are happy days. Singing and speaking with the vigor of a young man, he brings the Hare Krishna movement into the public eye by chanting in the parks, by distributing Back to Godhead magazine, by holding free Sunday love feasts. Many are attracted. His hopes for the future expand without limit. The Hare Krishna movement has taken root.